Welcome, everyone. For you of those that don't know me, my name's Jeff, aka Mad Hatter Organics, and this is the Growers Exchange podcast. I wanted to start this podcast to get more information out there about different growers, breeders, and industry companies. So stick with us as we exchange all types of grower knowledge. First off, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Autopot USA, for the best plant-driven automated watering system out there. Use discount code MADHATTER10 on autopot-usa.com for 10% off your entire order. Now, let's get started with the conversation. Welcome, everybody, to the 10th episode of the Growers Exchange podcast. Once again, I have an awesome guest today. His name's Andrew from Naturelion. He's a mycologist, and he knows a lot about all the benefits and functions of functional mushrooms. So, welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. It's been quite a wild ride, starting a mushroom company during COVID. This is kind of it was just one foot after the other, one thing at a time. We learned a lot, went through a lot of struggles, and here we are. Though it's 3 years later. I think we're one of the biggest suppliers of mushroom kits now in the country. We're in over 60 stores in Canada, across Canada. We also make mushroom coffee. That's really good. We're starting to get that out there too, and a lot of people are giving us great feedback.
Awesome.
So it's great. It's a great business to be in. I didn't start out as a mycologist. I started off working in the film industry, and gardening and growing was always something I enjoyed doing. So mushrooms was just kind of COVID hit, and the only thing open at the time was farmers markets. So it was like, what can I do? What can I grow? What can I sell? And I started going full tilt with the mushrooms. It was all started in my basement, and now we're here. We have graffiti walls and a big lab and a few flow hoods and stuff, and yeah, just making it work.
Cool. So,
Yeah.
before you said you were working in the film industry, were you interested in mushrooms? How did you realize mushrooms was your thing?
Well, I didn't really know it was my thing. I've always kind of been interested in them because they're crazy, very interesting creatures, right? There's so many different facets to mushrooms and so many different things they can do medicinally. They can kill you. They can, make you feel happy. They can, do wonders for your immune system. And so it was just kind of a fascinating plant to dive into. Like previously, I was into cannabis growing and that sort of side of it. And I read a lot about breeding and genetics, and the industry it just took off, and I didn't really see myself in that space anymore, other than just for personal consumption. So it turned into another thing, and mushrooms were just so fascinating. When I started growing them, it was one thing led to another, and next thing you know, the whole basement of my house was just full of mushroom grow bags and cultures and experiments, mishaps, successes, all sorts of different things, right?
Yeah, I can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
I've just kind of exploded with all my growing stuff, and mushrooms as well. You've been so gracious to me and sent me out a few kits, and now I have a real good stockpile of dried mushrooms for microdosing and for just beneficial supplements. Um, Maybe we could talk a bit about the benefits of different types of mushrooms. Maybe let's start off with lion's mane. What's so beneficial about it?
So lion's mane is a great mushroom for your brain. It actually helps stimulate the growth of neurons. It helps protect your existing neurons, so your brain cells. It helps keep them healthy, prevents them from dying off too quickly, and sparks healthy new growth. So it's an adaptogen. When it reaches the cell, it basically is teaching the cell or helping the cell remember what it needs to do to function correctly. So lion's mane is good for your brain, your nervous system. It can help people improve their memory. I've heard a lot of anecdotal evidence from my customers about better mood, brain fog going away, like, having clearer mornings. And, all around, it's also good for your immune system. So that's almost like a blanket statement for all mushrooms is they're great for your immune system. They have beta glucans in them in different levels. So some mushrooms will be better for the immune system than others, but they all have it, and it's, you're intaking it when you consume them, when you eat them fresh or take a capsule or powder, tincture, anything, right?
Nice. Yeah, I take lion's mane on a daily to help my neurons rebuild themselves. There's a disease running through my family that is a neurodegenerative disease, so I just like to hopefully prolong the effects of that. If I do test positive for it, then hopefully I can slow it down. Um,
Well, yeah, exactly. You might as well use what's available to you, right?
yeah, exactly. I
Mhm.
also microdose, so I cut my microdoses of psilocybin uh, mixed with lion's mane as well. So I'll do like a, kind of a half and half kind of thing.
Okay. How's that working for you?
I've, I mean, anecdotally, I've noticed some pretty good improvements. Like you
Cool.
said, brain fog is gone. It's allowed me to focus on tasks at hand. Um, I don't get that like kind of ADD, like, ooh, what's that shiny object kind of thing. It's just pick one thing and I stick to it now. So
Right.
it's
Better
been pretty good.
focus.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, Lion's Mane, I mean, it's been picking up a lot of steam ever since I started. Nobody really knew what it was. But over the years, all the TikTok videos, all the
Yeah.
different YouTube videos that are out there, people are starting to um, not even slowly learn about lion's mane. It seems to be spreading quite quickly. I get more and more people at our farmers markets asking about it, looking for it in different forms, and we have a lion's mane coffee that people are drinking, and it's kind of a good way to do it in the morning. You can just have your cup of coffee. The lion's mane's in there. What we do is we actually use an extract, so it's like a 10-to-1 extract of the actual mushroom fruiting bodies. Um, we use that in the coffee because it fully dissolves. So
Okay.
instead of, taking a capsule or putting some actual lion's mane powder into your smoothie, which is easy to do, you wouldn't want to necessarily put lion's mane powder in your coffee because it won't blend in. You could steep it into a tea or something like that, but it's not just gonna mix well with, coffee. There's that stuff out there, mud water,
Mm,
and I haven't tried it yet, but I've gotten a lot of feedback from even my customers, and um, it's exactly what it is. It's like mud. So you blend
yeah.
it, you need a blender, you have to blend it and drink it, and you're getting the fruiting bodies of the mushrooms, which is good. You're getting it into you, um, but I prefer like something that's just easier to consume, and it, fully dissolves. You can throw some sugar or milk on top, and it's a great, tasting coffee, and you get your lion's mane, so you're getting your daily dose of, healthy brain food, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna ask you about the coffee. It's kind of a new product for you that you're going down.
It's not necessarily new. We've had it for years, but we've kind of, there's been issues trying to source distribution, and we use an all organic coffee. All the ingredients are organic, so that makes it a little bit more difficult for us to source everything, and to offer everything at a good price, and that. So it's been 2 or 3 years in the making, kind of ever since we started with the mushroom growing. My wife made the coffee. Nicole, she's the genius behind the recipe, and it's a great tasting coffee. She actually made it for herself She was drinking Four Sigmatic, and she did her research on the benefits of. Obviously, she was in tune with the benefits of mushrooms at this point, but she did her research on the coffee she was drinking. She realized that it didn't have so much extract in it. It was kind of it was an expensive, gimmicky version of what she wanted. So she created her own coffee, which had like a daily dose in one cup because she only drinks one cup of coffee in the morning, and that helps her on a number of levels. So her favorite is the chaga actually. So she does it, more for her immune system and for her health, and to get that day started off right that way. So I'm more Team Lion's Mane, she's more Team Chaga, but yeah. So it's been a labor of love more or less because we're coming up with a product that it was for ourselves, and so sourcing quality ingredients is important, and scaling that is a little bit it's difficult. So we're working on it. We're sourcing new organic coffees and trying them and tasting them so we can kind of find the one that's right for us, so that we can scale up the product and ultimately go into some grocery stores. But we've got lots of little independent stores that are taking it on, and people ordering it from the website, and coming to see me at the farmers market and all that too. So yeah, it's quite a busy endeavor for sure.
Yeah, yeah, you're
Yeah,
taking on a lot. That's
yeah,
cool, man.
yeah. It's good. Yeah, it's for the greater good. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't actually tried any of the mushroom coffees. I've seen them all over the place, and yeah, maybe I'll have
Well, I'll
to.
send you some out. Yeah,
Oh,
you
oh,
can.
all
You
right.
can. Yeah, we'll give you a Naturelion mug, and you can in your videos you can just sip on some
Yeah,
coffee.
perfect. Exactly. Get rid of this Yeti mug full of stickers. Um, you mentioned chaga. Do you also cultivate chaga as well to make this coffee?
No, chaga is not a mushroom that can be cultivated per
Okay.
se. I mean, not that it can. It could be cultivated sort of in the wild. It wouldn't be something you'd grow indoors. It needs a living birch tree, so it's a parasitic fungus actually. It'll take over a living tree. It'll produce these almost tumor-like growths out of the side of the tree, which is the chaga fungus that gets harvested and used medicinally, and it's really good for our immune systems. And it's a immunomodulation mushroom, so it helps balance your immune system. So if you have arthritis or eczema or any sort of like autoimmune condition, chaga can really help out with that.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, yeah, we can't grow it indoors. There is a company, I believe, in Quebec that's cultivating it outdoors, by inoculating living trees. Um, Now there's some ethical
Yeah.
dilemmas behind this as well, because it will live on the tree for quite a long time. Like the chaga, once it takes over a birch tree, it could be 10, 20, even 30 years before the tree will die, but inevitably it will kill that tree.
Hmm.
Um, Now this is a natural process that's been happening on its own, and there must be a reason for that. And new once a tree dies, new trees replace it. In nature. So it's not. I don't think it's like naturally the end of the world. But if we go and inoculate every birch tree on the planet with this fungus, then we'll probably be out of birch trees before
Yeah.
too long.
Yeah.
Um, it also will grow on maple and oak, but it's rare to actually see it growing on those trees. So it prefers the birch.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
which is like a lot of mushrooms. They they have these very weird tendencies, especially in nature, to grow in symbiotic relationships with other plants or
mhm.
fungi, and they basically create these situations that can't be recreated indoors by a lot of growers. So
Yeah.
not yet, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, as science and stuff improves, maybe we can replicate it and not do so much damage to, living things.
Yeah.
But uh, another beneficial mushroom is turkey tail. Are you able to cultivate that indoors? And do you?
It can be cultivated. Yeah, we actually we sell a liquid culture for that on the website. So you can inoculate some substrate bags that we also have with the grain sterilized and some straw substrate that you could basically grow your own turkey tail. It's not the easiest mushroom to grow. The mycelium will take over pretty quickly, almost like an oyster mushroom. It'll grow within a month or two. You'll have fully colonized substrate. But when you try to grow the turkey tails, there's some nuances there. They won't grow extremely big indoors in like a grow bag scenario. So
Hmm.
doing it on a commercial scale, it's not really too common. But doing it for your own personal use, absolutely. You could, harvest a few turkey tails and like you did with your lion's mane, dry it and turn it into a powder and encapsulate it and have something organic that you made yourself. Um, so there's that. The other thing about turkey tail and like the reason why I don't grow it is because the spores that come from it can interact with the other mushrooms in your grow room. So unless you had like a dedicated space for turkey tail to grow commercially, you wouldn't really want to do it because the spores can interact in a negative way with like lion's mane, pink oysters, and different things like that. Really, any mushroom, if it spores a lot, um, it can interact with your other mushrooms because they like kind of like cannabis growing, like parts per million in your reservoir. Similar thing applies in the air. So there's particles in the air, the spores, the mushrooms actually recognize that. And they'll go into like a dormancy or kind of a dying off period because there's too many spores in the air, and they're not able to breathe in the oxygen that they're looking for, right? So,
Yeah, very interesting.
mhm.
Never thought of that. It's kind of
Yeah,
like
and
a
it's something
battle
that
for the fittest.
you don't really run across that in the natural habitat. There's so much airflow,
Yeah.
maybe there's little microclimates and stuff, but indoors it's a little bit trickier to kind of get the mushrooms to do, exactly what you want. So,
Yeah. And what are some of the benefits of a turkey tail for your health?
uh, it's really good for your immune system. Actually, there are a lot of studies are saying that it's one of the best ones for your immune system. It's the highest in beta glucans. Um, a lot of people use turkey tail, um, when they're going through end of life, cancer, that kind of thing, chemotherapy, to basically help strengthen your immune system because you're, beating it down so much. So you need something to balance that and counteract it. And a lot of people use turkey tail for that reason. I've heard of a lot of people actually giving it to their pets if they discover that their pet has cancer or some sort of a condition. They'll feed their animals turkey tail, and it'll actually, extend their life for a few years, which is great, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I never thought about giving it to animals. No
Yeah,
idea.
it's lion's mane, turkey tail, all of these things now. People are using it and mixing it in their animals' foods, and
Yeah, why not? It's a natural thing.
yeah, and it's not so far off that like an animal couldn't find a mushroom in nature. There's this like a lot of animals that eat mushrooms. There's a monkey specifically that lives primarily, can't remember the name of it, but it lives primarily off of a certain kind of mushroom. And this mushroom grows out of the side of trees, and the monkeys kind of feast on it. It's not, there's it's hard to see, but there's a beetle behind me.
Oh yeah.
Um, and that's an ambrosia beetle. And I didn't really know about this before I hired these graffiti artists, and they kind of came and did their own thing. And Nick Sweetman, who put the beetle, um, he had a whole story with it because I said, what is with this beetle? We kind of got mushrooms over here and a beetle over here, and I'm thinking, what did you do here, right? He's like, no, it's got a story. So the ambrosia beetle actually um, cultivates mushrooms for food, and it eats the mycelium that it cultivates. So it uses organic materials brings them back to the den and continues to propagate these mushrooms that it uses to feed its family and itself, right? So there's a lot of insects that actually do similar things. The leafcutter ant, you've seen in National Geographic carrying all the leaves across the log. They're
Yeah.
actually bringing the leaves back to their den where mushrooms will grow on that organic material.
Hmm.
And they say that the mushrooms are tracked on the ants' like legs, the spores. Mycelium will be caught in the hairs on their legs, and they'll actually track that around the den and grow these mushrooms and consume them as well. So another thing that I don't think a lot of people know, because I never knew this, termites. We all think that they eat wood and they kind of munch on your house and destroy your house. Well, what they're actually doing is harvesting the wood to bring it back to the mound to grow mushrooms. And the largest edible mushroom that exists, it grows primarily in Africa, but it's called the Traumatis something or other. I don't want to get the scientific wording wrong,
Yeah.
but it's the largest edible mushroom, and it grows out of the side of a termite hill,
Hmm.
and it can get as big as your torso.
Wow.
It looks similar to an oyster mushroom, but the locals there actually eat these mushrooms when
Yeah.
they see them. They harvest them and eat them. So
That's pretty cool. I
yeah,
know there's also another mushroom that is only grown on dead insects as well. I believe
yeah.
cordyceps? So,
Cordyceps. Now it's not only grown on dead insects. Like they've kind of figured out how to propagate it, so they do grow it on
yeah.
grains and some other mixtures indoors. But in nature, it looks for a larvae, a host, and it'll take over the larvae and then, kill it, obviously, and shoot mushrooms out of its head, right? And they're these little orange Cheeto-y looking mushrooms that you could probably walk past 100 times without knowing them. They kind of grow under. Um, they like a really humid environment, so they kind of grow under like mossy areas and like low ground cover plants
Hmm.
that where they'll contain like a microclimate of humidity underneath. So you'll often find them there. Um, I think there's some that they harvest in the Himalayas, and those ones are like, I guess they're like the OG of cordyceps because they still go for about $2,500 an ounce dried.
Jesus.
Um, and they're really hard to find. They only
Yeah.
grow on a specific insect in the Himalayan mountains. And you can imagine digging through the dirt trying to harvest an ounce of these mushrooms would be quite difficult. So
Yeah.
they go for a big price tag. Um, there's also a mushroom. It kind of takes over living ants and causes them to run up the side of a tree
Mm.
where their head explodes and the spores of the mushrooms get transported through the forest.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So it's
actually
all,
was listening to a
yeah,
podcast with Paul Stamets, and he was
yeah,
mentioning that he was doing research of killing ants inside the house. So they were eating his baseboards or something inside of his house, and he fed him some particular mushroom, and it just took it back to its colony and died off.
right.
Instead of using like a harsh chemical, you can feed him some sort of mushroom.
Yeah, it's a totally a potential, insecticide in that
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, it's a kind of a cannibalistic mushroom, right? Now,
Yeah.
although we don't want them to come after us or anything.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And I believe that there's, a lot of knowledge in plants and, fungi, and these are things that have been bred, passed down through lineages of, throughout nature through millions of years, things that they've learned that they adapt, they speak with other plants and they speak with other species and they grow in harmony. And they're really, truly a very captivating thing. Once you start growing them, it's like you're like diving down a rabbit hole. Or even once you just start kind of learning about them, there's so much to intake all in a, it take many, many years to learn everything. And there's still so many things that we're all discovering, on a daily basis, I think. So,
Yeah, yeah. It's over the past year or two or so. I got introduced to the whole psilocybin side of things first, and then I realized how massive beneficial that all these culinary type mushrooms were. And so I actually found you on Instagram. I reached out to you, and you were kind enough to send me out a couple of your boxes of lion's mane, and I knew nothing about them, and now I know a lot more, and I'm super grateful for that. It's been a big benefit for sure.
yeah, yeah, and it's like I said, it's fascinating little process that it doesn't take very long. Like you got your lion's mane kits, and within a couple of weeks you had, big lion's mane coming out. And I think at the beginning there was a little bit of a humidity issue that you might have had,
Hmm.
and then we solved that. You put them in a Martha tent,
Yeah,
and I think I gave you the advice to just spray them more heavily and keep that tent really, really kind of foggy, so to speak. And that really helps lion's mane, grow and develop those nice hairs or spines that everybody's kind of looking for. I get that question a lot with lion's mane is how come mine doesn't have spines? And people will grow it and it'll do really well. They'll get a nice like meaty mushroom out of it, but it just won't develop those spines. And there are two things. The key to doing that is, humidity, number one, patience, number two. So as long as your mushrooms aren't like turning yellow all over, they can keep going a little bit longer and the spines will get longer and you'll get that beautiful looking mushroom. It might not be the same as the one you see on Google image search
yeah,
because those ones are, they're growing outdoors and the environment outdoors, it's perfect because if a mushroom has popped up somewhere in nature, it's found a microclimate that is, suitable to hosting it, and it has enough time to develop. A lot of those mushrooms are kind of overdeveloped from a gourmet culinary standpoint. You wouldn't want to
mm,
necessarily pick some of these lion's mane that they look really, really nice and the spines are really, really long, but they're not. They might be a little bit bitter or not have the best texture. I find for texture, for cooking, you want to harvest them just as the spines start to form. So like they're not going to get like a quarter inch long or an inch long or anything like that. Just as soon as you see like teeth forming on the surface, it's time to harvest them and make your steaks or turn them into powder. I think if you're going for the powder approach though, you can let them go a little bit longer. So you can let those hairs form, let the plant build up its medicines basically, and then harvest them. It doesn't matter if they're really yellow on the mushroom itself because you're going to turn it all into powder.
yeah,
And I don't know if you noticed when you were growing them that once they start to yellow, when you cut it open, it's still like
yeah,
white as snow on the inside, right? So,
yeah, yeah. Those lion's
mhm.
mane were pretty interesting to grow. They're like a from another dimension almost. But yeah, you cut them open and they kind of like for myself, I kind of had like a coconut almost smell to it.
Yeah,
It was a different
yeah.
smell, but it was. I mean, it wasn't off-putting whatsoever. I'm not
No,
really
it's
like a
not.
big like edible mushroom person. Like I don't really like mushrooms on the pizza or anything, but I'll take them in powdered form all day.
Yeah, lion's mane is one of the more subtle flavors that I grow of everything I grow. Um, People say it tastes like, lobster or crab. I don't really get that from it. I feel like it absorbs the flavors that you're cooking with. So
Mm,
it's great in like a pasta sauce or I pull it apart and make tacos out of it,
yeah,
and you get the texture of meat. Um, which I do eat meat too, but sometimes I get in a phase where I'm just eating mushrooms and kind of cooking them as meat, and I don't really miss it for a couple of days here and there. But like these tacos with lion's mane, they're the best tacos I've ever had. So,
Yeah.
and the mushroom is definitely the texture is making up for it because you can get it really nice and crispy, and it's just not something like typically if you were like putting ground beef in a taco, it wouldn't be really crispy,
Hmm.
but with the mushroom, you get it nice and crispy, and it just adds different textures to your foods, and you know it's versatile. So one guy, he buys the kits from me, and he grows mushrooms, the lion's mane specifically. He harvests it, and he just takes like the whole ball, like head of lion's mane, and he puts it in the frying pan, and he presses down on it with like a heavy weight, and he turns into the steak that like it looks like an actual steak, and he smothers it with barbecue sauce and
Hmm.
peppercorns, and it's yeah, it's phenomenal.
Cool. Yeah, I know you can, depending on the size of the head of lion's mane, you can just basically cut it straight down the middle and turn it into a big flat steak.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, so there's so many things. I can't wait to kind of keep going with it. Like I got a lot of interest from people that want to work together, and they kind of contact me. We've had a few people approach us in the last little while. One guy from another company, he specializes in glowing plants, so bioluminescent plants. He brought me a culture of it's called Pinellus stypticus, which is a glowing oyster mushroom variety. So it actually glows in the dark. So this is like something new we're working with. I've got it in liquid culture. I've got it growing on agar. We're going to hopefully transfer it to the next stages pretty soon and see if we can get some mushrooms to actually glow for us.
nice.
And then we'd like to like hopefully put that out so people can also do it at home, and because
Yeah.
they're non-toxic, they're not like oyster mushroom that you'd want to eat. Um, they might make your stomach feel a little bit upset, but they won't kill you or anything like that. Um, they're bitter, so it's not like you want to like cook these up in a meal, but it would make a cool night light in your children's bedroom, I think.
Yeah.
So
Do you
yeah.
do any special like black light or UV light or anything to be able to see them, or they just glow?
No, they glow. They're bioluminescent. There's a whole number of mushrooms actually that are bioluminescent.
Yeah.
There's actually some scientists that believe that mushrooms started as bioluminescent, and it was bred out of them
Hmm.
over time. And I think there's a lot of logic to that because mushrooms grow in dark, wet places. So they would have started potentially in caves. They would have, started um, and they would have been glowing to attract insects and bugs to help, spread those spores and spread the mycelium around. And eventually, as they made their way out, into the light, this was kind of lost in translation. So there's still a few hundred species that do bioluminesce to various degrees. Some you can see with the naked eye. This species that I have specifically, a lot of people say you can see it with the naked eye. So you can see it growing even on the agar. I haven't experienced this yet, but as you kind of work with the culture and find its strong points, you can kind of isolate for different traits and genetics. And so we'll hopefully be able to get something that glows really, really well, that you can see with the naked eye. And if it doesn't work with this culture, we'll be trying more down the line. But I've seen some pictures that are just, they blew me away because they were just taken with a cell phone, and the mushrooms are just glowing green, like really cool.
Yeah, crazy. I'll have to do some Google searching for those.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Um, so let's maybe try to talk about how you culture mushrooms. Obviously, you were talking about agar dishes. You want to have your spore prints in your agar dishes and be able to culture them from there to get the liquid culture from it. Uh, what else would you need to, start just the lion's mane block, let's say?
Like to start it from scratch,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So you're going to want a pressure cooker. That's the most basic tool that every mushroom farmer has to prevent contamination from occurring. So um, you start mushrooms basically the beginning of their life cycle could be a liquid culture. It could be growing on a organic. It's actually made of seaweed. It's called agar agar.
Mm.
We mix that with some sugars. It creates like a gelatin. The agar solidifies it into a gel, so the mushrooms can kind of grow on the surface of that. Provide some nutritions to the mushrooms, some nutrition to the mushrooms. Um, Basically, you could start with a grocery store mushroom. You could buy any mushroom, your favorite mushroom, pick it up, take it home, um, grab it. You want to tear it apart very gently. You're going to want to do this in a very clean environment. And you could use a scalpel to take out a little bit of the inside of that mushroom and transfer that onto the agar, and it will grow. You'll see in 3 or 4 days, you'll see the mushrooms start to kind of develop. Um, from there, you'd have to kind of clean it up. It may have some spores, it may have contamination, it may not be successful at all. You might want to do, 10 different plates to kind of get it started. And then you can isolate a healthy clone of the mushroom, basically. And from there, you can make a liquid culture. You could go straight from agar to grains. And when we go to the grains, grains are a very nutritious food for the mushrooms, but it's also easy to break apart. So we use some sort of a grain, like I use rye grain. People use millet, brown rice. You can use anything really. Some people use Uncle Ben's uh, rice packs, and they put their spores in there or their liquid culture in there, and it takes over the rice once it's properly hydrated. And that breaks apart really easily. So you can use that to inoculate further substrates like sawdust or straw or coconut coir. And those are what we call bulk substrates. So basically, that's what you're going to be growing your mushrooms on. But it all starts from this little tiny speck of mycelium growing on an agar dish or in a petri dish. Doesn't have to be that complicated. There's a lot of people that just pick up a kit and grow it. You can also take a mushroom kit and break it all up. Like here, I have one here, but basically it's, a block of sawdust, and you can break this up. It's pretty hard, but you can break it all up, and you could boil some straw for a couple of hours in a pillowcase, drain it off, and then you can inoculate that straw with the mycelium that's growing like on your kit. And that you could then take one of these kits and transplant it into 5 Home Depot pails full of straw. And you could grow 10 or 20 pounds of mushrooms from the one block. So that's what, taking it maybe to the next level. It's not as advanced as having to culture your own mushrooms on a petri and get a clean and healthy culture, because it's really hard to do when you're living in a normal house, which isn't necessarily the most sterile environment. There's tons of bacteria and mold spores in the air. It's easy to get contamination with something like that. So it's best to start with like a liquid culture or something from a grower that's going to be easier for you, unless you're like ready to just start experimenting and slicing open mushrooms that you got. And you can even do it with a dried mushroom. So if you have a mushroom that's been dried for a period of time, like 6 months to a year, you can tear it open and you might see some living mycelium growing that you can scrape up and clone that. So you could even take preserved mushrooms essentially and possibly rehydrate them on the agar and get them to grow. So it's there's a lot to it, but it's very neat and it's very fascinating. I think every mushroom grower kind of finds their own niche too. So there's so many different, it's not like with cannabis, you might be like fighting over like who's growing what strain. I mean, on a commercial scale anyway. But, there's so many different facets to mushrooms that you can kind of pick anything about it and turn that into a hobby or a passion or a business, so.
Yeah. Yeah, you go going back to what you said about contaminations and whatnot, is uh, even growing organically, I have lots of bacteria and different types of microbes flying around, kind of thing. But I noticed with like the psilocybin growing stuff, where it was a lot of just very sterile kind of environment. You have to have clean stuff where a little speck of trichoderma will go a long ways on your cake. But with
Mhm.
these lion's mane blocks, you were able to just kind of cut away at it. If you did get a little bit of trichoderma growth on it, you're able to just cut it away and let the mushroom block keep doing its thing. Get a couple different flushes out of it. It was more. I feel like it's more resilient, trying to fight off
Yeah,
those pathogens.
it can be because it's once the mushrooms are fully colonized, they have a strength to them that nothing else can really kind of invade. Um, we get contamination though sometimes where we'll get a little spot of trichoderma or different kinds of molds and stuff. And when I first started growing mushrooms, I used to throw out all these things and think that I had lost and threw out, 60, 100 bags in my backyard and cut them all open and used them as, compost in the garden. But what I'm realizing, or what I've realized as you go on, is sometimes a small speck of contamination can easily be overtaken by the mushrooms with enough patience and time. So sometimes there's this one type of contamination that grows. I don't know what it's called exactly. It's very yellow. I think it's a type of trichoderma. I think there's like dark green ones. There's like this yellow one that we get sometimes, and it's like a cakewalk for the mushrooms. So every time I see it now, I just ignore it and I wait a week and it's totally gone because the
Nice.
mushrooms are eating through it, right? So um, there's people cleaning up oil spills with oyster mushrooms. I think Paul Stamets talks about that a lot.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's they really kind of consume anything in their path. So you kind of want to stick with organic materials. You don't want to necessarily be using things that you don't know the origin of. Like I've seen a TikTok video the other day where they're growing mushrooms on a toilet paper, a roll of toilet paper, and it's bleached toilet paper. So you're going to have bleach in your final product. There's going to be some element of that chlorine that the mushrooms consume. So you want to be careful with mushrooms, and you want to make sure that they're organic or that you're using organic substrates. Because yes, they'll grow on cardboard and newspaper, but you've got inks going into your food.
Yeah.
So, this isn't something that you want for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you bring that toilet paper thing up. I've had a few people actually send that exact same TikTok
Yeah,
clip to me the
it's
past couple of days.
500,000 views, and I hope obviously there's going to be people out that go out there and try it, and I hope that somebody kind of helps educate them. Maybe
Yeah.
they'll see this video, and it'll help educate them a little bit more about what they should be growing on. It's
Yeah.
cool to experiment though. Like I follow one guy on Instagram, and he's growing mushrooms on like old books and gym socks and
Yeah.
tennis balls and all sorts of, and just for the photograph really. But it's quite amazing to see that they'll grow on everything.
Yeah. For sure. Um,
Yeah,
are they a heavy metal? Do they pick up lots of heavy metals when they're kind of in that environment?
yeah, exactly. So they tested them like after cleaning up an oil spill,
Hmm.
and you would not want to eat those mushrooms afterwards. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. Who would
Yeah,
have
so you
thought
got to be
that?
careful too. Even picking in nature, like for the 99% of the time, if you're in the forest, it's going to be okay. And what you're picking is going to be next to organic, like as organic as it can get.
Yeah.
But if you're foraging mushrooms near a sewage plant or anything like that, or a plastic facility, or you're at the forest at your park and the dogs pee on the tree every day, right? You might
Yeah.
have some element of that. So you just got to be careful with what you consume and where you find it. And so that's another thing that like people can do if they want to experiment like with the straw is to like hydrate the straw and chop up just a bunch of oyster mushrooms like from the grocery store and try and grow them on the straw because they will take over this, like they will take over to some degree. Have a good head start there because I've seen all sorts of different, experiments like that, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but it doesn't hurt to try it out for sure. So
Cool. Yeah. Let's talk about your tinctures. I noticed that you had a bunch of tinctures on your website there, and uh, there was one in particular that had all five of the mushrooms in one. That
yeah.
that'd probably be a massive health benefit for sure.
Yeah, well, we don't make the tinctures, but we sell them. They're all organic. It's a really good company that we work with. Um, the five mushroom is a great one for people that are trying to just have like a well-rounded, mushroom intake. So it's going to be a little bit less strong in terms of like you're not going to get as much lion's mane or cordyceps as if you were taking it straight, but you'll get a more balance. So it's going to be good for your immune system. It's going to give you the benefits for your nervous system and for your brain and for your circulation and blood flow. Um, but that being said, some people like to just take a certain one because they have an ailment. They've done their research and they know that they need a specific mushroom. They really want to have better memory, so they're using lion's mane, or they're athletes, so they might want to stick to using cordyceps because it's great for endurance athletes and blood flow, circulation, that type of thing. If you want to have better night's sleep, a lot of people have come to me and said that reishi is working for them
Hmm.
for sleep. So it's not really known for that. I mean, it's becoming more known for that. It's been used for thousands of years in Eastern medicine for your immune system as like an anti-cancer mushroom. They call it the fountain of youth mushroom, I believe, in Asia. Um, so yeah, it's also good for sleep. So it's something, we're actually going to be turning that into a new product that falls in line with our coffee, but it's going to be a hot chocolate
Oh,
that you
nice.
could consume at night with reishi mushrooms in it. So you're not going to get your caffeine, and it'll be low sugar, but it'll still, taste really chocolatey and delicious, right? So yeah, there's
Nice,
all
nice.
sorts of different ways you can consume them. Extracts are a great way because they're just easy and you could put them in anything. So if you're a coffee snob and you don't want to drink our coffee, you've got your favorite blender, you go to Starbucks every day, you can take your dropper and you can put some cordyceps or lion's mane or turkey tail in your coffee and just go from there. So
That's cool. Never thought about just adding it into a drink. I usually just take my tinctures right underneath my tongue, kind of thing,
yeah, well, that's the hardcore way of doing
yeah.
it.
All right. Well, is there anything kind of new and exciting for you in the upcoming future?
Well, just to see us in more and more stores, working with a few different sales reps and just, we're in 60 stores now, and I hope by the end of the year it's going to be closer to 500. So it's really going to be, I think, a blockbuster year for this company. Christmas was great. A lot of people supported us and bought them as Christmas presents for each other. So we're already kind of ramping up for Christmas, and I know it's 11 months away, but that's kind of what we're doing. Spring is also a great season for us too. We're all the garden centers are opening up,
Yeah.
so you're going to see us in a lot of those. Hopefully, everyone in Ontario, and then we've got some people maybe out in Alberta we might be working with as well too, and BC to try and get it out there as well. So
Awesome.
yeah, just keep an eye out for it. And if you see a mushroom grow kit at your local garden center, grab it, support the local business, support us, and just support making the world a better place where people grow their own food. Because I think, teaching that skill to future generations, to yourself, it's an important life skill. The price of food is just going to keep going up.
Yeah.
And you got to eventually, you're going to have to take matters into your own hands because wages aren't going to go up as much as the cost of living, and food is going to become more scarce. So the more people that live on this planet, this is a very essential life skill. Go
Mhm.
back, 10,000 years, if you couldn't grow food or you couldn't hunt, you weren't going to survive, right? So I think this is very important for us to not lose track of, not fall into those conveniences of the drive-through and just being able to go to the grocery store and get what you want whenever you want, because the pandemic showed us it was easy to run out of things, toilet paper being the main one. But so how is anybody going to grow mushrooms if there's no toilet paper,
Yeah,
right?
I was just gonna
Uh,
say.
but it wouldn't take much of a supply chain malfunction for us to be out of food or very low on food, and we'd kind of have to rely on each other. And the people that were already growing their own food are going to be a step ahead of the game for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. I'm
And yeah,
I'm fortunate enough to have a decent backyard, so that's my whole plan this year is to have a just a massive garden of vegetables and fruits,
yeah.
and
Well, just
also,
think of the thousands of dollars you can save. Really, it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
it takes time and it takes patience and some effort, but the reward is you get to eat better food, fresher food, and it's you can share it with your neighbors and your family because there's usually an abundance of it.
yeah,
Maybe they're growing something you're not growing, right? Maybe they're growing mushrooms in a tent and you're growing tomatoes and you guys are now sharing, and
yeah,
you're avoiding going to the grocery store altogether and spending $800-900 a month to feed your family. So
yeah,
that can get really costly. If you could save 12 grand a month on food by doing it yourself, I mean, that's great for your education fund or whatever your vacation fund or whatever you're looking to do with your extra money, right?
yeah, yeah, totally. Well, kind of rounding out the hour here. Where
Yeah.
can people find you? Social medias.
Instagram, I'm very active on there. You can message me. I'll get right back to you. It's at Naturelion Mushroom. No S on the end, just at Naturelion Mushroom. You can go to our website, naturelion.ca, browse through our products. We've got a blog you can read, um, a few different articles about mushroom growing. We've got some cool videos. Um, and we're going to kind of be expanding on that as well too as we go in the future. So yeah, just reach out any way you can. My number's on the website. You can text me, you can call me. I'm an open book, so if you have any questions about growing mushrooms, I can do consultations. Uh, I don't even mind, like, if you got questions, call me. I'm not going to charge you, but call me and let's talk about mushrooms for 10 minutes. And if you want to talk longer, we can do that too. Like, I've gone through so many trials and tribulations. I've made mistakes. We've fixed them, so I think I can be an asset to anybody who's like starting up their own mushroom farm or
Yeah,
interested in that aspect of it. Save them money just in the future. Like, I made all sorts of mistakes. I've started off a few mushroom farmers like this already, and they just kind of reached out to me, and I just kind of poured my knowledge over to them. And I think that's the best thing about the community is we all just kind of share and teach. So
perfect. Well, Andrew, you've been awesome to me over the past year. I've reached out to you a few times. You've sent me products out. I appreciate you doing that. It's helped me, massively. So, yeah, all I can say is thank you.
no,
And
no problem.
I hope we can work together in the future again. So, um,
For sure. This is episode 10, so I'll be on for 100.
all right, perfect. All right.
All right.
Well, thanks for everyone watching and listening. If you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, making sure you're leaving reviews, likes, comments, all that stuff. It helps me and it helps the algorithm. It helps people like Andrew get pushed out to more viewers and more people to support his company. But
Excellent.
Thanks for listening and watching, guys, and we'll check you on the next episode.